Shane O'Connor didn't expect the woman behind the gate to look like she belonged on the cover of a fashion magazine. He was here to fix her fence. That's it. $50, maybe 70 if she was generous. His 6-year-old son, Oliver, needed new sneakers, and Shane wasn't too proud to take whatever work he could find. "Hi," the woman said, stepping out of her sleek black SUV. Her heels clicked over the driveway like she was walking into a boardroom. "You're here for the fence." "Yeah," Shane said, adjusting the worn cap over his messy brown hair. "Name's Shane. You called about the back panel falling down." She nodded, brushing a strand of dark hair behind her ear. "I'm Fallon Vance. I think it happened during last week's storm." "I didn't notice until yesterday." He followed her around the house, trying not to stare at how confident she looked even in something as simple as jeans and a white blouse. The backyard was massive, the lawn flawless, and the pool covered neatly for the season. The panel at the back corner of the property had indeed collapsed. Shane knelt down, inspecting the rotted slats. "I can replace this," he said. "Might take a couple hours. I've got the tools in my truck." "I trust you," Fallon said, and something about the way she said it made him pause. Most people didn't say that, not to a guy with grease on his jeans and calluses on his hands. "You don't need to stay while I work," he added quickly. "I'll be in and out, just need to get the job done." Fallon tilted her head slightly. "You're not one for small talk, are you?" "Not really," Shane muttered. She smiled. "All right then, I'll be inside if you need anything." He got to work, grateful to focus. Every swing of his hammer was a distraction from the chaos of the past year, losing his job at the auto shop, his ex moving across the country, and leaving Oliver with him full-time, the endless bills piling up. He didn't have time to think about women, let alone someone like Fallon. But she brought him lemonade halfway through. "Thought you might need this," she said, holding out the glass. He took it, startled. "Thanks." She leaned against the patio column, watching him. "Do you do this full-time?" Shane shook his head. "Used to work in a garage, good with my hands. Been picking up side jobs where I can. Single dad life doesn't come with a lot of stability." Fallon's face softened. "You have a kid," he nodded. "Oliver, he's 6. He's with my neighbor right now." "That's a lot to juggle." Shane took a sip of lemonade and shrugged. "You do what you have to." There was a quiet moment between them. She didn't look away. "You know," Fallon said, "the way you're fixing that fence. You're careful, you give a damn, that's rare." Shane didn't know what to say to that. Compliments weren't something he got often. "Thank you," he said quietly. He finished the repair just after sunset. The backyard light flicked on as he packed up his tools. Fallon came back out, a light jacket wrapped around her shoulders. "How much do I owe you?" Shane hesitated. "60's fine." She raised an eyebrow. "That's too low." "Honestly, it's fine. I didn't do that much." She pulled out her wallet and handed him a crisp $100 bill. His fingers froze. "I can't take that. It's too much." "You can and you will." Her voice was steady, not unkind. "You earned it." He looked at her, really looked at her this time. There was something in her eyes, kindness, strength, maybe even curiosity. "Thanks," he finally said. "Really?" "Will you be all right getting home?" she asked. "Yeah, just a few miles out." "My truck's old, but it runs." She nodded, then hesitated. "Do you ever take on bigger jobs?" Shane blinked. "What kind of jobs?" "I just bought a second property. I could use someone who's good with repairs, reliable, someone I can trust." "Yeah," Shane said, not sure if he was dreaming. "Sure, you can call me anytime." She smiled again, and this time it wasn't polite or distant. It was soft, genuine. "I think I will." He drove home in the dark, Oliver asleep in the backseat, the $100 bill resting on the dash like a reminder that maybe, just maybe, things were starting to turn around. He didn't know who Fallon really was. Not yet. And he definitely didn't know she was a CEO. Or that she'd watched him walk away with something stirring in her chest she hadn't felt in years. Something real. Something dangerous. Something like falling. The next time Fallon called, Shane was underneath a rusted-out Buick, elbow deep in a brake line for his neighbor's cousin. He wiped his hands on an old rag and pressed the phone to his shoulder. "I found a leak in the guest house roof," she said without preamble. "It's nothing urgent, but I'd rather fix it before it becomes one." "I can take a look tomorrow morning," Shane replied. 9 too early. That works. She didn't mention payment. He didn't ask. Something about the way she said his name made him show up 15 minutes early. Fallon wasn't in heels this time. She wore boots and a long gray coat, her hair swept into a low twist that made her look softer somehow, less untouchable. She led him through a side gate, past a set of stone steps that descended toward a smaller structure tucked behind her main house. "You're using this place for guests?" Shane asked, glancing at the curved windows and the ivy crawling up the side. "Not yet. I was thinking of turning it into a studio, maybe an office," she said. "I haven't decided." He climbed up the ladder and stepped onto the shingled roof, careful with his footing. She stayed below, hands in her pockets, watching him with an unreadable expression. "You don't like standing still, do you?" he called down after a few minutes of silence. She tilted her head. "Why do you say that? You're pacing." "Just a little." Fallon blinked as if she hadn't noticed. "I'm used to being busy." He crouched near the ridge. "Well, you've got a couple cracked shingles." "It's not bad, but I'd replace them before the next rain." "Can you handle it today?" "I'll need to grab supplies, but yeah, you got plans for the afternoon. Just a video call at noon." He climbed down and brushed grit from his palms. She handed him a bottle of water without saying anything. "Thanks," he said, taking it. Fallon looked at him then, really looked. "Do you always work alone?" "Most of the time." "No one to help out." Shane capped the water and leaned on the ladder. "People help when they can, but I don't count on anyone." Her gaze didn't waver. "That sounds exhausting." He didn't answer. Instead, he left for the hardware store, picked up what he needed, and returned before her call ended. Through the guest house window, he caught a glimpse of her, standing straight, eyes focused, hands moving as she spoke to someone on a screen. Sharp. Commanding. Nothing like the woman who'd handed him lemonade a few days ago. When she stepped outside again, her expression had shifted back to neutral, but her voice still carried a quiet edge. "Everything all right?" he asked as he climbed back up the ladder. She hesitated. "Just work." People assuming they know better because they've been in the game longer. "You run your own thing, you could say that." She walked to the base of the ladder, chin lifted. "I inherited my father's company 3 years ago. It's a software and data firm, global clients. About 800 employees." Shane paused, hammer mid-swing. "That's not what I expected." "Why not? I figured you were maybe in design or real estate." "I'm not good at pretending to care about throw pillows." He laughed, the sound catching him off guard. "Fair." She walked a few steps away, looking up at the trees bordering the property. "I've been trying to do things differently than he did. More transparency, less ego." Her voice dropped slightly. "But I'm still treated like a girl in her father's chair." He finished hammering the last shingle in place, then climbed down. "That's their problem, not yours. You say that like it's easy." "I say that because I've worked for people who didn't know the difference between a socket wrench and a screwdriver, and they still acted like they were kings." He paused. "You don't talk like them." Fallon looked at him, puzzled. "Them? People with money. You listen. You don't throw your name around. You paid me more than I asked without making it weird." She gave a small shrug. "I didn't grow up with money. My dad built the company when I was a teenager. Before that, it was just us and a 2-bedroom apartment behind a laundromat. That surprised him. He didn't say so. I used to think if I worked hard enough, I'd be taken seriously," she continued, "but it doesn't always work like that." Shane wiped his hands on his jeans. "You want to be liked or you want to be respected?" "Both," she said plainly, "but I'll settle for being heard." They stood there for a beat too long. Fallon glanced at her phone. "Do you need to get back to your son?" "My neighbor's watching him until dinner. He's probably drawing dinosaurs on her kitchen wall." "Does he like school?" "Depends on the snack that day." She laughed, and it was the first time it sounded unguarded. "Do you always keep people at arm's length?" she asked suddenly. Shane's jaw tightened. "Do you always ask personal questions when someone's holding a nail gun?" "You're not holding the nail gun anymore." He looked down at his hands. She was right. Fallon stepped closer, not too close, just enough for her voice to drop. "I'm not trying to figure you out, Shane. I just want to know what kind of man offers to fix something without knowing what it's worth." He met her eyes. "Maybe the kind who doesn't measure everything in dollars." She nodded slowly. "Maybe." He packed up his tools and she walked him to the front again. This time, she didn't offer him cash. Instead, she handed him a folded piece of paper. "What's this?" "My other property. You said you were good with your hands. I need someone to take a look at the place before I decide what to do with it. He opened it. An address in the hills and a gate code. I'll check it out tomorrow, he said. I won't be there, but the caretaker knows you're coming. He nodded once and stepped off her porch. Neither of them said goodbye. They didn't need to. The gate creaked open after Shane keyed in the code Fallon gave him. The second property sat high above the valley, tucked behind a winding road lined with jagged oaks and wild rosemary. The house was older than he expected, mid-century bones with long glass windows and a sunken courtyard, but it had good structure. Solid, quiet. A man in a navy windbreaker met him at the front steps. He had silver hair, a gravelly voice, and a clipboard tucked under one arm. "You're Shane." "That's me. She said you'd come by. I'm Russell. Been watching over the place since her father passed." Shane nodded once. "Any major issues I should know about?" Russell gestured to the side of the house. "The retaining wall's starting to bow. Foundation might need reinforcing, and the plumbing's outdated. That's not a surprise, though. The place hasn't been touched in years." Shane spent the next hour walking the perimeter, checking for cracks, rot, water damage. The back deck was warped, and tree roots had started pushing through the flagstones near the pool. But it was nothing he couldn't handle if she was really serious about restoring it. He was halfway through the kitchen, examining the ancient copper pipes under the sink, when he heard a car pull into the drive. He straightened, wiping his hands on the back of his jeans as Fallon stepped through the open doorway. This time, she wore a navy coat and flat boots, her hair tied back. She looked different here, less polished, more grounded. "I thought you wouldn't be here," he said. "I changed my mind." She looked around the room. "The place always felt like a mausoleum, but I've been thinking about turning it into something else." He waited, sensing there was more. "My father bought this house when the company hit its first million in revenue," she continued. "He used to bring clients here, throw parties with rooftop string quartets and imported caviar, but he never spent a single holiday in it." Shane leaned against the counter. "So it's all show." "It was," she said. "I want it to be something real now." She looked at him then, not in the way people usually do when they're asking for an estimate, more like she was waiting to see if he'd understand what she wasn't saying. He did. "I can give you a breakdown by tomorrow," he said. "But I'll be honest, it's going to be expensive to fix everything right." "I'm not worried about the cost." He raised an eyebrow. "Most people are." "I'm not most people," she said without a hint of arrogance. He studied her face. "What are you really looking for here?" Her eyes flicked to the tall windows, the empty fireplace, the dust that clung to decades of disuse. "A place that feels like mine," she said. "Not something my father built to impress strangers, something I chose. Something I made. You think fixing the walls and plumbing will give you that. I think starting over anywhere is better than pretending the past didn't happen." Shane didn't push. He'd rebuilt enough engines to know some things needed time before they ran clean again. "I'll help you with it," he said, "but I'll need to bring in a crew for the structural stuff. I can't do it all solo." "I trust you to pick the right people." He turned toward the door. "I'll get started early next week." "Wait," he paused. "Do you want to come by for dinner tomorrow?" "Nothing formal, just roasted chicken and maybe a bottle of wine." He blinked. "You inviting me to your place?" "I am." "What about Oliver?" "He's welcome too. I've got a drawer full of crayons and not a clue how to use them." Shane hesitated. "You can say no," she added. "I won't take it personally." "No," he said. "I mean yes, we'll come." She gave a small nod, then walked past him toward the patio. He watched her go, wondering why his pulse had picked up. The next evening, Oliver stood on Fallon's porch with his Spider-Man backpack slung over his shoulder and a look of wide-eyed awe as she opened the door. "You really live here?" he asked. "I do," Fallon said, crouching to his level. "And I have something for you." She led them inside, past the grand staircase and into a den where a low table had been set up with markers, sketch pads, and a foam dinosaur set. Oliver's face lit up. "Go ahead," Shane said, gently patting his son's back. As Oliver dove into the crayons, Fallon turned to Shane. "Kitchen," he followed her, the smell of roasted garlic and rosemary already filling the air. The table was set for 2 adults and 1 child, nothing extravagant. But the lighting was warm, the music low, and for the first time in a long time, Shane felt like he wasn't standing on the outside of something. "Do you cook often?" he asked as she pulled the chicken from the oven. "Only when I want to relax." "It forces me to slow down." He leaned against the fridge. "You don't strike me as someone who slows down much." "I'm trying," she said, glancing at him. "I've spent years proving myself. Maybe it's time I figure out who I am when I'm not fighting everyone else's expectations." He looked past her, watched Oliver draw a blue T-Rex on the wall of paper she'd taped to the floor. "You're good with him." "I've never really been around kids," she admitted. But he made it easy. Dinner was easy too. They talked about music, movies, and the worst jobs they ever held. Shane once unloaded pallets in a warehouse that didn't have air conditioning. Fallon had interned at a fashion firm where she was told not to speak unless spoken to. After dessert, Oliver curled up on the couch with a pillow and a blanket Fallon had set out just for him. Shane stood near the patio doors, silently watching the city lights shimmer in the distance. Fallon joined him, arms crossed lightly. "I never thought I'd see this house full of life," she said. "You made it that way." He turned toward her. Her face was close. "You don't have to do all of this to impress me," he said quietly. "I'm not trying to impress you. Then why invite me into all of this?" She held his gaze. "Because I don't want to be the woman who hides behind balance sheets and boardrooms anymore. And because you're the first person who's looked at me without seeing a dollar sign or a last name." He stepped closer, close enough to see the slight tremble in her fingers as she reached up and brushed a strand of hair behind her ear. "I can't promise anything perfect," he said. "I've got a kid. A life that's messy, and I'm not the kind of man who fits into a world like this." "Good," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, "because I'm tired of that world. I'd rather build something new." He leaned in slowly, cautiously, like he was testing the edges of something fragile. She met him halfway. The kiss wasn't rushed. It was quiet and certain, like they'd both known it was coming but neither had dared to say it aloud. When they finally pulled apart, she didn't look stunned or nervous, she just looked sure. And for the first time in years, so did he. The rhythmic clatter of tools echoed through the second property's courtyard as Shane finished laying the last paver stone. Sweat clung to his brow despite the cool March air. Across the yard, Oliver sat cross-legged near the garden, meticulously painting a birdhouse Fallon had bought him the week before. For the first time since the project began, Shane had brought his son along at Fallon's request. "I figured he might like the fresh air," she'd said that morning, handing Oliver a pair of gloves and a lunchbox shaped like a rocket. Now, as the sun dipped behind the hills, the job was almost done. Fallon stepped out from the house, pulling her sweater tighter as a breeze stirred the pepper trees. "You finished the path." "Yeah," Shane said, brushing grit from his hands. "It's solid, should hold up for years." She nodded, then lowered herself onto the edge of the stone planter beside him. "I was thinking of planting citrus out here, lemons, maybe blood oranges." He glanced over at her. "You planning to live here?" She hesitated. "I thought I'd sell it, but lately, I'm not sure." Shane leaned back on his palms. "You don't have to decide yet." Fallon looked at Oliver, who was now adding glitter glue to the roof of the birdhouse with deep concentration. "He's creative," she said quietly. "Too creative," Shane said, smiling. "Last week he turned a shoebox into a time machine and tried to mail himself to the dinosaur age." Fallon laughed, the sound softer than usual. "I like having him around." Shane's smile faded slightly, his eyes shifting back to her. "You sure this isn't too much? I know your life's full." She turned fully toward him. "You think I care about full? I've spent the last decade in rooms filled with people who talk too loud and mean too little. I'd rather have a backyard with a 6-year-old painting dinosaurs." He didn't respond immediately. His gaze dropped to her hand resting on her knee, close enough to touch. He'd never been the type to rush things, too many years of learning how quickly good things could vanish, but something about her, about them, felt different. Steadier. Fallon's phone buzzed in her jacket pocket. She pulled it out, glanced at the screen, and tucked it away again without answering. "Work?" Shane asked. "My board's been pushing for me to relocate to New York," she said, voice measured. "They want the headquarters there. They think I should be closer to the investors." Shane sat up straighter. "Are you going?" "I was," she said. I thought I had to, but now, I'm not sure chasing the next title is worth losing what this could become. What do you mean? She looked at him, calm and certain. I mean, I don't want to leave, not anymore. He searched her face, trying to make sense of the quiet conviction there. That's a big decision. Yes, and I've made bigger ones for worse reasons. Before he could answer, Oliver stood up and held the birdhouse above his head. I'm done. Fallon stood and walked toward him, crouching to inspect the glitter-covered masterpiece. It's perfect, she said. We should hang it on the fig tree. As they worked together tying the string, Shane watched them from a few steps away, something heavy and unfamiliar settling in his chest. He'd spent so long carving out a world where emotions were luxuries he couldn't afford. But this, watching the two of them under a pink sky, laughing over crooked paint strokes and glue-stiff fingers, felt like the kind of life he hadn't dared imagine. Later that evening, after Oliver had fallen asleep in the backseat during the drive home, Shane carried him inside, tucked him into bed, and returned to the porch. Fallon was waiting there, leaning against the railing with a thermos in hand. I brought coffee, she said, handing it to him. The good kind, not that motor oil you pretend is drinkable, he chuckled, taking a sip. You really think I pretend? She leaned her shoulder against his. I know you do. They stood in silence for a long moment, the distant hum of traffic below the hill the only sound between them. Why me? He asked finally. You could be with someone who understands your world. I don't want someone who understands the boardroom, she said. I want someone who sees me when I'm not trying to prove anything, someone who doesn't flinch when things aren't polished. You see things other people miss, that's rare. He looked down into the cup, then back at her. I've got baggage, you know that. So do I, she said, but I think we carry it better together. Shane set the coffee down. I'm not perfect, I mess up, I get tired. Sometimes I don't know what I'm doing. Neither do I, she said. But I know this, I want a life that's built, not bought, something earned, not performed. He stepped closer, the air between them gone in a blink. You really staying? He asked. She nodded. I already told the board this morning. I'm bringing in a managing director to handle the East Coast accounts. I'll stay here, I want roots. He placed his hand lightly at her waist. Then let's build something real. She leaned in, pressing her forehead to his. Deal? The next weekend, they hosted a small gathering in the courtyard of the second property, now fully restored. Shane grilled while Oliver ran circles around the fig tree. Fallon set out lemonade and chips, laughing as a neighbor's dog tried to steal a burger bun. She introduced Shane to friends from her team, people who were genuinely curious, not performative, and Shane introduced her to his sister, who'd flown in from Portland after hearing he was finally smiling again. By sunset, lanterns glowed over the patio, and soft music spilled from the speakers Fallon had installed just that morning. Shane stood beside her, his arm resting easily around her shoulders. This place feels different, she said, watching Oliver dance with a neighbor's toddler. It should, Shane said. You made it yours. No, she said, glancing up at him. We did. He kissed her then, right there in front of everyone, with the kind of certainty that needed no words, no explanations, just presence. Later that night, after the last guest left, and Oliver had curled up on the couch again with a blanket and a plastic dinosaur, Fallon walked out to the patio and found Shane staring up at the stars. Do you realize, she said, curling her hand into his, that all of this started with a broken fence? He smiled. Best fence I ever fixed. She leaned her head against his shoulder. You still think you don't belong in my world? He looked around the yard, at his son asleep inside, at the woman beside him who had thrown her entire life into a new chapter without blinking. No, he said. I think we made a new one, and this time they both fit perfectly. Fallon stood in front of the mirror, adjusting the single button on her deep green dress. Outside the restored house, a string quartet tuned their instruments beneath a canopy of golden lights. The property had transformed completely since the first time Shane set foot on it. The cracked tiles were gone, the walls repainted, the garden reborn. But more than the house, she had changed. A knock at the door turned her around. Shane stepped inside, wearing a charcoal gray suit that fit him like it had been made for this day. He looked around the room, taking in the soft candlelight and the open French doors leading to the courtyard. You clean up, Fallon said, her voice low. Alarmingly well. He ran a hand through his now neatly trimmed hair and gave a mock bow. "You're the one that made me buy a real suit. Told me I couldn't show up at a fundraiser in jeans. You wore work boots to our first dinner. I consider this progress." He stepped closer, his expression shifting into something quieter. "You know, this is the first time in years I've been to anything like this." She reached for his hand. "We don't have to stay long, just a few hours. It's for the literacy program. They asked me to host, and I want you here." He looked at her fingers laced with his. "You nervous? I'm not used to letting people see this part of me." "The part that isn't trying to win a contract or lead a meeting. You mean the part that makes paper lanterns with Oliver?" She smiled, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. "There are going to be people here tonight who knew my father. Some of them still think I'm just filling his shoes. I can't shake the feeling that no matter what I do, it'll never be enough for them." Shane's voice was steady. "They don't get to define what's enough. They've tried." She met his gaze. "But I'm tired of pretending I don't care. I do." He squeezed her hand. "Then let them see you, all of you. The woman who's built something better than what she inherited." Fallon let out a slow breath. "Will you stay close? I'm not leaving your side." Outside, guests were beginning to gather. A mix of investors, community leaders, and nonprofit partners moved through the space, sipping champagne and admiring the transformation of the property. Shane stayed near Fallon, but let her take the lead. She introduced him only when necessary, never qualifying who he was beyond a quiet, "This is Shane." Halfway through the evening, while Fallon spoke with a woman from a local school district, Shane wandered toward the back of the garden where Oliver and two other kids were huddled around a small telescope. A young woman he recognized as one of Fallon's staffers kept a gentle eye on them, reading from a book of constellations. "Dad, look." Oliver pointed upward. "That's Orion." Shane crouched beside him. "You remembered?" "I told Fallon I wanted to find it tonight. She said we'd have clear skies." Shane looked up. She was right. He stayed there a few more minutes, then returned to the house. Fallon was speaking with a man in a tailored navy suit who was gesturing toward the house with a critical expression. Shane didn't interrupt, but Fallon caught sight of him and excused herself. "That was Thomas Larrick," she said, joining Shane near the French doors. "He was on the board when my father ran the company. He thinks I should have sold the second property instead of restoring it." "Well," Shane said, nodding toward the crowd enjoying the wine bar on the back patio, "he seems outnumbered." She touched his lapel. "You've been quiet. Everything okay?" He took a moment before answering. "Just thinking how fast this all changed. I used to worry about getting through the week. Now I'm standing in a house I helped rebuild with you at a fundraiser for something that actually matters." Fallon leaned into him. "Does it feel real yet?" "It does now." They stayed like that for a while, the soft music weaving through their silence. When the last speech was made and the final toast given, guests began to file out, offering polite goodbyes and handshakes. Several people thanked Shane directly, some recognizing his handiwork in the renovations. Others simply acknowledging the quiet strength in how he stood beside Fallon without needing to prove himself. After the last guest left, Shane helped Fallon carry empty glasses to the kitchen. She glanced at the clock. "Oliver should be asleep by now. I told Mia to let him stay up until 9. Shane leaned on the counter. "He's been asking if we're going to stay here more often." Fallon turned. "Would you want to? I like the idea of mornings with sunlight over that fig tree. I like that he feels safe here, and I like waking up next to you." She stepped into him then, resting her hands on his chest. "We could make it permanent. I've already talked to my architect about converting the guest house into a full standalone, your own space, our space." He raised an eyebrow. "You sure you want me here full time?" "I'm sure," she said. "But only if you bring the coffee you pretend is good." He laughed, then kissed her slow and deep, the kind of kiss that had nothing to do with events or property lines or old ghosts, just them. Weeks passed. Then months. They moved into the restored house, slowly blending their lives in the way real things do not all at once, but piece by piece. Oliver had his own room with glow in the dark stars on the ceiling. Shane took on more projects. Working with nonprofits, Fallon introduced him to restoring community centers, fixing school playgrounds, work that mattered. One spring morning, Fallon stepped onto the patio with 2 mugs and found Shane tinkering with a small bird feeder near the fig tree. "You're up early," she said, handing him a cup. "Couldn't sleep," he said. "I was thinking." She sat on the bench beside him. "About what?" He pulled a small wooden box from under the bench and opened it. Inside, nestled in dark velvet, was a simple gold ring. "I was thinking," he said, "that I never expected any of this. Not you, not this house, not a life that feels like it's mine, but I don't want to go another day without making it official." Her eyes widened, but she didn't speak. "I love you," he said. "And I want to spend the rest of whatever we've got building something that's ours. Will you marry me?" Fallon didn't pause. She didn't blink. "Yes," she said. "Yes, 1,000 times yes." He slipped the ring onto her finger, and she kissed him with a joy that was quiet but bottomless. Later, they told Oliver, who immediately asked if he could wear a cape to the wedding. Fallon said only if it matched her shoes. He proceeded to begin sketching the design that afternoon. They married in the garden the following summer, not with extravagance, but with intention. Friends, family, laughter, music, and love that didn't need to shout to be heard. As the sun set over the hills, Fallon stood with her hand in Shane's, watching Oliver chase fireflies along the stone path. "This," she whispered, "is everything I didn't know I needed." Shane kissed the side of her head. "It's everything we built," and it was.